Here's a question. Would you pick up something in the middle of a blizzard if you had no idea what it was? Jody Robson did. Highway 95 in northern Idaho, traffic completely stopped. Emergency alerts blaring. Everyone stayed in their cars. Everyone except her. Jody Robson couldn't ignore the feeling something was wrong. She stepped out of her truck with nothing but her camera and a restless need to escape her own head. The wind screamed through the pines. She adjusted her lens, framing the frozen landscape. That's when she heard it. A sound so faint it barely cut through the howling storm. A cry, weak, desperate, fading fast. Stranded drivers huddled in their cars, windows fogged, nobody moving. The sound came again, softer this time, like something fading in the cold. Jody's breath caught. She turned toward the roadside, where snowdrifts had piled waist-high against the guardrail. Most people would have written it off as wind through metal. Most people would have climbed back into the warmth of their truck. She wasn't most people. Jody dropped to her knees and started digging through the snow with bare hands. The cold bit into her skin, numbing her fingers within seconds. She dug faster. The crying stopped. Panic set in. Had she imagined it? Was she too late? Her hand hit something solid beneath the powder, something small, something alive. She brushed away the last layer of ice and froze. A tiny black creature stared up at her with eyes far too aware for a newborn anything. It looked like a kitten, sort of, but the paws were wrong. Too large, the bones too heavy, the shoulders too broad for something that fit in her palm. It didn't run, didn't hiss. Instead, it reached toward her with claws extended, trembling violently. Not from fear, from cold so severe its energy was nearly gone. Jody unzipped her jacket without thinking. The moment she pressed the creature against her chest, it stopped shaking, its eyes locked onto hers, not like an animal looking at a stranger, like something that had been waiting for her specifically. "What are you?" she whispered. The creature's ears twitched. Its claws dug gently into her sweater, holding on like its life depended on it. Around them, car engines idled. Windshield wipers scraped ice. Nobody noticed the woman kneeling in the storm. Nobody saw what she'd just pulled from the snow. Jody zipped her coat closed, the creature's heartbeat rapid against her ribs. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Why was this animal out here alone in sub-zero temperatures? Why did it cling to her instead of fleeing? And why did looking into its eyes feel like staring into something ancient, something wild, something that didn't belong in Idaho or anywhere else humans thought they controlled? She should have left it there. Should have called wildlife services. Should have done 100 things differently. But she didn't. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories reach. Jody had been driving for 3 hours before the highway sign started flashing red. She wasn't running towards something. She was running away. The divorce papers sat in a manila envelope on the passenger seat, finalized 2 weeks ago. Her photography studio in Boise had closed last month after clients stopped calling. At 34, she had watched her entire life collapse in slow motion. So when the blizzard forecast hit, she didn't turn around like everyone else. She kept driving north into the mountains where nobody knew her name and nobody would ask questions. Highway 95 looked like a parking lot by the time she reached the Idaho Panhandle. Red and blue lights flashed from patrol cars blocking both lanes. A trooper waved vehicles to the shoulder. Jody pulled over behind a semi-truck already covered in snow. The radio crackled with emergency updates. wind gusts reaching 70 miles per hour, visibility near zero. All travelers advised to shelter in place until conditions improved. She watched families huddle in their cars, kids pressed against fogged windows. A couple in a sedan shared a thermos of coffee. An elderly man sat alone in a pickup, engine running, staring straight ahead. Normal people doing normal things, staying safe, following instructions. Everything Jody used to do before her life fell apart. She grabbed her camera from the back seat and opened the door. The cold hit like a physical force, stealing the air from her lungs. Snow whipped sideways across the asphalt. She raised the camera, framing the pine trees bent nearly horizontal by the wind. The shutter clicked, once, twice. The viewfinder filled with white. She lowered the lens and listened to the storm's roar. That's when the other sound broke through. Faint, almost swallowed by the wind. A cry that didn't belong to any bird or engine or branch scraping metal. Jody turned her head, trying to locate the source. It came again, weaker this time. She looked back at the line of cars. Nobody moved. Nobody reacted. The sound was so quiet that maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe grief was playing tricks on her exhausted mind. But it came a third time. Jody walked toward the guardrail, where snowdrifts had piled higher than her waist. The crying grew slightly louder. She stopped at the edge of the road, staring down at the massive white mound. Logic said to get back in the truck. Logic said whatever was out there probably wouldn't survive anyway. Logic said she'd already made enough bad decisions this year. That was when she took action. That was when she saw it. The black creature, with the unusual look. Jody didn't hesitate. She unzipped her heavy winter coat and pressed the creature against her chest, right over her heart. The moment its body touched her sweater, something changed. The trembling stopped. Not gradually, instantly, like a switch had flipped. The creature's head nestled against her, its breathing steadying, its claws gripping her sweater with surprising strength. It held on like its life depended on it. Jody zipped her coat closed, enclosing the creature in darkness and warmth. Its heartbeat pounded against her ribs, rapid and desperate. She stood slowly, legs shaking, and looked back at the line of cars. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had seen her pull something from the snow. The world continued around her, oblivious. She climbed back into her truck and started the engine. The heater roared to life. She kept her coat zipped, feeling the creature shift slightly against her skin. It wasn't scared anymore, wasn't crying. It pressed closer, its body warming, its breathing matching the rhythm of her own. Jody pulled back onto the highway as the patrol cars began waving traffic through. The storm was breaking. The road was opening. She drove north toward her grandfather's old cabin in the woods, the only place she had left to go. Inside her coat, the creature's eyes opened wide in the darkness, not like an animal adjusting to shelter, like something that had finally found exactly what it was searching for. Hit subscribe right now because what Jody didn't know was that this creature would grow faster than anything natural. And the bond forming between them in that moment would soon become the most dangerous thing in her life. The cabin sat 15 miles off the main road, buried in pines so thick the forest swallowed all sound. Jody's grandfather had built it decades ago for hunting trips he'd stopped taking years before he died. Now it belonged to her, the only thing that still did. She carried the creature inside, her coat still zipped, and locked the door behind her. The interior was freezing. She'd arrived 2 days ago with barely enough supplies to last the week. No internet, spotty cell service. Just silence and space to figure out what came next. She cranked the propane heater and pulled the creature from her coat. It looked worse in the light, fragile and weak. The fur was thin, and the body felt alarmingly light. Yet the bones beneath felt too dense for something so small. She laid it on the couch and wrapped it in heated blankets from the dryer. It didn't move, didn't protest. Just watched her with those unsettling golden eyes that tracked every motion she made. Jody had no idea what to feed it. She searched her phone for information on newborn kittens, but the cell signal kept cutting out. Finally, a page loaded. Kitten milk replacement formula. Syringe feeding every 2 hours. Keep them warm. Monitor breathing. She didn't have formula, didn't have a syringe. She had canned soup, crackers, and 3-day-old coffee. She heated water and mixed it with powdered milk she'd bought for tea. Used an eyedropper from the first aid kit. When she brought it to the creature's mouth, it turned its head away. She tried again. Nothing. Its eyes closed slowly, body going limp. "Come on," she whispered. "You didn't survive that storm just to give up now." She squeezed a single drop onto its lips. The tongue flicked out, tasted. A moment passed. Then the creature's mouth opened, latching onto the dropper with surprising force. It drank desperately, swallowing every drop she could give. When the dropper emptied, it made a sound. Not a meow. Something lower, more primal. Jody refilled the dropper 4 times before the creature finally stopped drinking and curled into the blankets. She should have called someone. Wildlife services, a vet, anyone with actual training. But something held her back. Maybe it was the way the creature looked at her. Maybe it was the fact that saving this tiny life felt like the first thing she'd done right in months. Or maybe she just didn't want to be alone anymore. She named it Whisper because of the way it had cried in the snow. So quiet, so close to gone. Over the next 3 days, Whisper grew stronger. Started moving around the cabin on unsteady legs. But the strange behaviors started almost immediately. The first time a snowplow rumbled past on the distant road, Whisper's entire body went rigid, ears flattened, lips pulled back to reveal tiny teeth that looked sharper than they should. A hiss erupted from its throat that didn't sound like any cat Jody had ever heard. It sounded like a warning. When coyotes howled in the valley below, Whisper stopped mid-step and stared at the door. Not cowering, not hiding, watching, calculating, like it was memorizing the threat for later. The intelligence bothered her most. Whisper watched everything. When Jody opened the cabinet for food, Whisper sat nearby, eyes tracking the motion of her hand on the handle. When she turned the doorknob to step outside, Whisper studied the mechanism with an intensity that felt wrong. Animals didn't do that. They didn't observe and learn like they were taking notes. On the 4th night, Jody fed Whisper actual food. Shredded chicken from a can. Whisper devoured it in seconds, then licked the plate clean. Already bigger, already stronger. The oversized paws didn't look quite as disproportionate anymore. The shoulders had broadened. When Whisper stretched, the muscles moved beneath the fur with a power that shouldn't exist in something this young. Have you ever saved something and wondered if you made a mistake? Drop a comment below. Jody fell asleep on the couch that night with Whisper curled against her side. The warmth was comforting. The steady breathing was familiar. For the first time since the divorce, she didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness pressing down on her chest. She slept deeply, dreamlessly, until something woke her. She opened her eyes in darkness. The cabin was silent except for the heater's low hum. She turned her head. Whisper wasn't beside her anymore. She sat up, scanning the room. Her heart started to pound. Whisper stood at the window, completely still, ears twitching, eyes fixed on something outside in the tree line. The moonlight caught those golden irises, making them glow. Jody's breath caught. This wasn't the behavior of a frightened kitten. This wasn't defensive posturing or curiosity. Whisper's tail moved slowly from side to side. Body low, muscles coiled, not afraid, waiting. Like something in those trees was supposed to be there. Like Whisper had been expecting it all along. And whatever it was watching the cabin right back. Jody's hands went cold. She wanted to move, wanted to turn on the lights. But something told her that breaking this moment would be a mistake. So she sat frozen on the couch, watching Whisper watch the forest, and wondering what on earth she'd actually brought into her home. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what's waiting in those trees is something Jody never could have predicted. And Whisper's growth is about to accelerate in ways that will change everything. Morning came with fresh snow and no answers. Jody checked the tree line through the window. Nothing moved, no tracks, no disturbance. Just endless white and silent pines. She turned back to find Whisper sitting on the kitchen counter, staring at her with those unblinking golden eyes. "How did you get up there?" The counter was 4 feet high. Whisper tilted her head but offered no explanation. 2 weeks passed. Then everything changed. Whisper doubled in size. Not gradually, not in the slow, predictable way kittens grew. One morning, Jody woke to find Whisper sprawled across the couch, easily the size of a full-grown house cat. The paws that had seemed too large now matched the body. The shoulders had widened into muscle. The jaw had squared off, powerful and defined. When Whisper yawned, the teeth gleamed sharp and white, far longer than they should be. Jody measured her against a doorframe. 18 inches from nose to tail base. In 2 weeks, that wasn't possible. That wasn't natural. She tried searching online again, but the information made no sense. Domestic cats grew slowly over months. Wild cats followed predictable patterns. Nothing explained what was happening inside her cabin. The behaviors got stranger. Jody walked into the living room one afternoon to find Whisper clinging to the wall 8 feet off the ground, not scratching, not climbing, just pressed there, defying gravity, muscles perfectly still. Their eyes met. Whisper dropped silently to the floor and padded away like nothing had happened. The movement became unnatural, too. Whisper walked without sound. Not the quiet steps of a cat. Complete silence. No paw falls. No breathing. When Jody turned her back, Whisper could cross the entire cabin without making a single noise. She'd spin around to find those golden eyes inches from her leg, watching, waiting. The jumping was worse. Whisper cleared the kitchen table from a standstill. Launched from the floor to the top of the refrigerator in a single bound. Jody watched her leap from the couch to a ceiling beam 12 feet up, land perfectly balanced, and walk across it like a tightrope performer. "What are you?" Jody whispered. Whisper's response was always the same. A low, rumbling sound that wasn't quite a purr, more like distant thunder. The hunting started in the 3rd week. Jody woke to find a lifeless rabbit on the kitchen floor. She had locked the doors, locked the windows. There was no way Whisper could have gotten outside. Yet there it was, fur still warm. The creature's struggle had ended instantly. She checked every entry point. Nothing. No gaps. No openings. The cabin was sealed. That night she heard scratching. When she investigated, she found Whisper working at the cupboard latch with her paw, not batting at it, manipulating it. The door swung open. Whisper pulled out a bag of jerky, opened it with precision, and ate methodically, while Jody stood frozen in the doorway. "You figured out the latch," Jody said softly. Whisper looked at her. Those eyes held something that made Jody's skin prickle. Understanding, awareness, intelligence that shouldn't exist in an animal this young, or any animal at all. When neighbors drove past on the logging road half a mile away, Jody started closing the curtains. The closest cabin belonged to Dutch Kearney, a retired ranger who checked on her every few days. He'd knocked on the door twice. Both times, Jody had hidden Whisper in the bedroom and lied about being fine, about adjusting to solitude, about not needing anything. She couldn't explain Whisper, couldn't justify keeping something that was clearly wild, couldn't risk losing the only thing that made her feel less alone. Because despite everything strange and unsettling, Whisper had become necessary. The nightmares had started after the divorce. Jody would wake, gasping, heart racing, chest tight with anxiety that followed her into daylight. She'd spent months like that, drowning. Since bringing Whisper home, the nightmares had stopped. When panic crept in during the long, dark hours, Whisper would appear at her side, press against her. That low, rumbling sound vibrating through the silence. Jody's breathing would slow. Her heart would steady. The weight in her chest would lift. Whisper didn't fix her, but Whisper made the brokenness bearable. Would you keep something dangerous if it was the only thing keeping you sane? Be honest in the comments. On a gray morning 4 weeks after the storm, Jody woke to find Whisper curled against her back, radiating heat. She lay still, listening to the even breathing, feeling the rise and fall of Whisper's chest. This bond wasn't normal, wasn't healthy probably, but it was real, and Jody would protect it as long as she could. She slipped out of bed carefully. Whisper didn't stir, just shifted slightly, still deep in sleep by the dying fire. Jody pulled on her boots and coat, grabbed her camera, and stepped outside. The morning air bit at her face. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the world in perfect white. She walked toward the tree line, framing shots of frost-covered branches. The light was perfect, golden and soft. She adjusted the lens and took 3 photos. When she lowered the camera, she saw them. Tracks in the snow, massive, cat-like. 4 distinct pads and claw marks pressed deep into the powder. They led from the forest to the cabin's back door, and then circled the entire structure before disappearing back into the trees. Jody's breath caught. She knelt beside one print. It was easily the size of her outstretched hand, larger than any bobcat or lynx, larger than anything that should exist in Idaho. Her mind raced. Mountain lion, maybe, but mountain lions didn't come this close to human structures, and these prints were too big even for that. She followed the trail with her eyes. The tracks circled the cabin 3 times, methodical, deliberate, like whatever made them was studying the building, learning it. She stood quickly and walked back inside, locking the door behind her. Whisper was exactly where Jody had left her, curled by the fireplace, eyes closed, breathing steady, the picture of innocence. Jody moved closer, studying the sleeping form. The paws were large, but not that large. The body was maybe 25 inches long now, growing impossibly fast, but still manageable. Still kitten-shaped despite the muscle. She looked at Whisper's feet. Clean, dry. No snow, no ice. Jody's heart started pounding. She walked back to the window and stared at the tracks circling her cabin. They were fresh. Made within the last few hours, while she'd been asleep. While Whisper had been pressed against her back. Unless Whisper hadn't been there the entire night. She turned back to the fireplace. Whisper's eyes opened slowly, fixing on Jody with that unsettling intelligence. The low rumble started, comforting, familiar. The sound that had chased away her nightmares for weeks. Jody's hands shook. Those tracks were too big. Whisper was too small. It didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. But as she stared into those golden eyes, a terrible question formed in her mind. What if Whisper wasn't growing at all? What if something else was out there? Something connected to the creature she'd pulled from the snow. Something that had been watching her cabin every night, waiting for the right moment to come closer? Or worse? What if Whisper was growing exactly as fast as those tracks suggested, and Jody just hadn't been paying attention to what was sleeping beside her? Smash that subscribe button, because what Jody discovers next will change everything she thought she knew. And the danger isn't just outside anymore. Jody spent 3 days watching Whisper, studying every movement, measuring the paws against her hand, comparing the sleeping form to the tracks outside. The math didn't work. Whisper was big now, nearly 30 inches long, but those prints in the snow suggested something twice that size. She told herself it was a mountain lion, a coincidence. The forest was full of predators, but the tracks appeared every morning, always circling the cabin, always fresh. On the 4th day, Jody decided she needed air, needed distance, needed to think without those golden eyes watching her every move. She left before dawn with her camera, telling herself she'd only be gone an hour. Whisper was asleep by the fireplace, curled tight, breathing steady. The ridge above the cabin offered the best view of sunrise over the valley. Jody had been there a dozen times. It was a 2-mile hike through dense pine forest, steep in places, but worth it for the light. She climbed in darkness, her headlamp cutting a narrow path through the trees. The snow was fresh and untouched, no tracks, no signs of wildlife. She reached the ridge just as the sky started to lighten, set up her tripod, adjusted her settings. The valley stretched out below, endless white, broken by dark patches of pine. She took the first shot, then another. The light shifted from deep blue to gold. That's when she heard the breathing, not her own. Something behind her, heavy, multiple sources. She turned slowly. 6 wolves stood 30 feet away, spread in a loose semicircle. Gray and white fur. Yellow eyes locked on her position. The lead wolf, a massive male with scars across his muzzle, took a step forward, his lips pulled back. No growl, just teeth. Jody's mind went blank with fear. Wolves didn't usually attack humans. Usually. But she was alone, on a ridge miles from help. And they were moving closer. She backed up. Her boot hit the tripod. The camera crashed to the ground. The wolves tensed. The lead male's ears flattened. Another step forward. The pack followed his lead, tightening the circle. Would you run or stand your ground? Comment below, because what happened next was beyond anything Jody could have predicted. Jody grabbed a dead branch from the snow, held it like a weapon even though she knew it was useless. The lead wolf was 15 feet away now, close enough that she could see the scars, The muscle, the intelligence in those predatory eyes. He was calculating, deciding if she was worth the effort. She opened her mouth to scream. A shadow moved through the trees behind the pack, silent, fast, low to the ground. The wolves didn't notice, didn't react. The shadow closed the distance in seconds, and then it wasn't a shadow anymore. Whisper exploded from the tree line. Not the whisper from the cabin. Something bigger, faster. Muscles rippling beneath black fur as she launched herself at the lead wolf. The collision was devastating. Whisper hit him mid-body with enough force to throw him sideways into the snow. He didn't have time to fight back, didn't have time to even snarl. Whisper's jaws locked on. The impact echoed. The wolf went still. Gone. Just like that. The entire pack froze. Whisper stood over the body, evidence of the battle on her muzzle, eyes fixed on the remaining wolves. She was massive, easily 60 pounds. Shoulders broad and powerful. The oversized paws now made perfect sense. This wasn't a kitten, wasn't even close. The other wolves backed away, slowly, then faster. Within seconds, they'd vanished into the forest, abandoning their leader without a sound. Whisper turned to Jody. Those golden eyes held no emotion, no recognition, just cold assessment. Dark marks stained the black fur around her mouth. Her breathing was controlled. Steady. This wasn't panic. Wasn't fear-driven defense. This was efficiency, predatory precision. Whisper had eliminated that wolf the way an apex predator does, quickly, brutally, and without hesitation. Jody's legs shook. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Whisper took a step toward her. Another. The snow compressed silently under those massive paws. When she was 3 feet away, Whisper sat. The low rumble started, that familiar sound that had comforted Jody through countless sleepless nights. But now it sounded different. Not comforting. Dangerous. "What are you?" Jody whispered. Whisper tilted her head. Blinked once. The rumble continued. She moved closer, pressing her side against Jody's leg. The same gesture she'd made 100 times in the cabin. The same contact that had made Jody feel less alone. But the body pressed against her now was all muscle and power. This wasn't a pet. This was something wild, wearing the mask of domesticity. Jody's hand moved without thinking. She reached down to touch Whisper's fur, needing to confirm this was real. Her fingers sank into the black coat. Damp. Warm. She pulled her hand back. Dark residue stained her fingertips. Not from the wolf. The signs of the fight were on Whisper's shoulders, her back, like she'd rolled in it or worn it. Jody looked closer at the fur. More marks covered the chest, the legs. Too much for just one battle. Her mind flashed to the tracks circling her cabin every morning. The lifeless rabbit that had appeared inside a locked house. The way Whisper could disappear and reappear without sound. "Where do you go at night?" Jody asked softly. Whisper rumbled louder, pressed closer. Jody looked down at the lead wolf's body. The takedown was clean, professional. The kind of thing that came from experience, from practice, from hunting regularly. How many animals had Whisper hunted in the 4 weeks since Jody found her in the snow? How many nights had she slipped out of the cabin while Jody slept, growing larger and deadlier with each hunt? And if she could take down a full-grown wolf this easily, what else was she capable of? Jody's camera lay in the snow 5 feet away. She picked it up with shaking hands. The lens was cracked, but functional. She turned it toward Whisper, framing the shot. Black fur, golden eyes, Battle-worn muzzle? The shutter clicked, evidence, proof of what she'd just witnessed. Whisper's ears twitched at the sound. Her gaze shifted to the camera, then back to Jody. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, maybe. Or warning. Jody couldn't tell. She lowered the camera. We need to go home. Whisper stood immediately and started walking down the ridge toward the cabin, not following, leading, like she knew exactly where they were going, like she'd been there before, probably had been. Probably every night while Jody convinced herself everything was fine. They walked in silence through the forest. Jody's mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. What had she actually saved from that snowdrift? Why had Whisper bonded to her so completely? And how long before someone else saw what just happened on that ridge? When they reached the cabin, Whisper waited by the door. Patient, calm. The residue on her fur was already drying to a dark crust. Jody unlocked the door, and Whisper slipped inside, immediately curling up by the fireplace like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just dispatched a wolf with terrifying efficiency. Jody stood in the doorway, staring at the creature who'd saved her life. Protection or danger? Those were the only options now, and she had no idea which one Whisper truly represented. She stepped forward to lock the door. Her boot hit something in the snow. She looked down. Tracks. Fresh. Leading away from the cabin toward the ridge. 4 massive paw prints pressed deep into the powder. The same ones that had been circling her cabin for weeks. They matched Whisper's feet perfectly. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like because Jody's about to discover something that will force her to make an impossible choice. And the danger is just beginning. Jody didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch with her laptop, Whisper's head resting on her thigh, and searched for answers. Black cats, wild felines, North American predators. Nothing matched. Whisper was too big for a bobcat, wrong build for a lynx, and mountain lions didn't come in solid black. Every search led nowhere. At 3 a.m, she found a name. Dr. Mason Graves. Wildlife biologist specializing in predator reintroduction and extinct species recovery. Based out of the University of Montana. His faculty page showed a man in his 50s, gray beard, kind eyes, standing next to a sedated cougar. Published papers on melanistic genetics. Conservation work across 6 states. If anyone could identify Whisper without immediately calling authorities, it might be him. Jody drafted an email 3 times before sending it. Kept it vague. Said she'd found an injured animal during the blizzard. Unusual markings. Abnormal growth rate. Needed expert opinion. She attached one photo of Whisper sleeping by the fireplace, cropped tight so the size wasn't obvious. She hit send at 4 a.m. and didn't expect a response for days. The reply came 6 hours later. That's not a domestic cat. Where exactly did you find this animal? I need more information, immediately. This is urgent. Call me. A phone number followed. Jody's hands shook as she dialed. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. This is Mason? Dr. Graves, I'm Jody Robson. I sent you the email about... Where are you located? Northern Idaho, near the Canadian border. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming up. Don't contact anyone else. Don't post any more photos. And for God's sake, be careful around that animal. Why? What is it? I need to see it in person to be sure. Can you keep it contained for 2 days? Jody looked at Whisper, who was now awake and watching her with those unsettling golden eyes. Contained. Right. Like that was possible. I'll try, she said. Mason arrived on a gray afternoon with portable equipment packed in a truck that had seen better days. He was taller than Jody expected, with the weathered look of someone who spent more time outdoors than in labs. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Show me," he said. Jody led him inside. Whisper sat on the back of the couch, perfectly still, tracking Mason's every movement. He stopped 3 feet into the cabin and stared. "My God," he whispered. "What?" Mason set his equipment down slowly, never taking his eyes off Whisper. "How long have you had her?" 5 weeks. "How big was she when you found her?" "Fit in my hand." Mason's face went pale. He pulled out a camera and started taking photos from different angles. Whisper didn't move, just watched him with that predatory stillness that made Jody's skin crawl. "I need samples," Mason said. "Blood, fur, saliva if possible. And I need you to tell me everything. Where you found her, how she's behaved, what she's eaten." It took an hour to explain. The blizzard, the crying in the snow, the rapid growth, the tracks circling the cabin, the wolf on the ridge. Mason listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When Jody finished, he sat back in the chair and ran a hand through his hair. "I need to run tests, but I think I know what she is." "What?" "Have you ever heard of the North American jaguar?" Jody frowned. "Jaguars are from South America." "Mostly, but they used to range all the way up to the Grand Canyon, even into Colorado and New Mexico. Melanistic jaguars, black ones, were documented in Arizona as recently as 1900. Then habitat loss, hunting, prey depletion. By 1950, they were considered functionally extinct north of Mexico." He gestured toward Whisper. "If I'm right, she's a direct descendant of that lineage. Somehow, a population survived, hidden, untracked, breeding in isolation for 70 years. Jody's mind reeled. "That's not possible." "Look at her." Mason's voice was steady. "That's not a domestic cat. The bone structure is wrong. The muscle distribution, the behavioral patterns you described. Jaguars are ambush hunters. They climb, they swim, they're silent. And they have the strongest bite force of any cat relative to their size. They strike with decisive force." Jody thought about the wolf, the crack she'd heard, the sudden silence. Would you have reported this, or kept it secret? Drop your answer in the comments. Mason spent the next 3 hours collecting samples. Whisper tolerated it all with eerie patience, as if she understood this was necessary. When he finished, he packed his equipment carefully. "Results will take 48 hours. I have a colleague who owes me favors. He'll run this quietly." "And if you're right?" Jody asked. "If she really is what you think?" Mason's expression hardened. "Then you're harboring an untracked apex predator, one that's growing at an accelerated rate and exhibiting hunting behavior. That's a federal issue, state issue. Fish and wildlife will want her. Researchers will want her. And the ranchers in this valley will want her gone. She saved my life." "I believe you, but that doesn't change the law." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "There's something else you should know. Jaguars are territorial, solitary. If she really is what I think, there might be others out there. A breeding population. And if she's this bold at 5 weeks old, I don't want to imagine what the adults are capable of." The words hit Jody like cold water. The tracks circling her cabin. The intelligence in Whisper's eyes. The way she'd stopped that wolf without hesitation. "What do I do?" Jody asked quietly. Mason looked at Whisper one last time. Hope I'm wrong, because if I'm right, the decision won't be yours to make. He left as the sun set. Jody locked the door and turned to find Whisper sitting in the center of the room, watching her. The low rumble started, comforting, familiar. But now Jody heard it differently. Not a purr, a warning signal. The sound an apex predator makes before it decides whether you're family or food. 2 days felt like 2 weeks. Jody barely left the cabin. Whisper's behavior shifted subtly, more watchful, more alert, like she sensed something was coming. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jody's phone rang. Mason's voice was tight. I need you to sit down. Just tell me. DNA confirms it. She's Jaguar lineage, melanistic variant. But there's more, he paused. The growth rate isn't natural. Her cellular structure shows markers consistent with isolated population adaptation. Accelerated development. It's an evolutionary response to low population numbers. She'll reach full maturity in 6 months instead of 2 years. How big will she get? Full-grown female jaguar? 180 pounds. Maybe more. Another pause. Jody, there are laws. Federal regulations. Any undocumented large predator has to be reported within 72 hours of identification. I've already pushed that timeline by running tests quietly. What happens if you report her? Silence. Mason, what happens? His voice dropped. If authorities find out, you won't just lose her. They'll classify her as invasive, ecologically disruptive, potentially dangerous to livestock and humans. He took a breath. And invasive species get one classification under federal law: immediate removal. They'll end her story, Jody. No sanctuary, no relocation. They'll terminate her within 72 hours of seizure. The world tilted. Jody's vision blurred. She looked at Whisper, who was staring at her with those impossible golden eyes. The creature she'd saved. The only thing that made her feel less alone. The animal that had risked everything to protect her on that ridge. How long do I have? She whispered. I can give you 48 hours before I'm legally obligated to report. After that, I'm complicit. Mason's voice cracked. I'm sorry, I really am. But this is bigger than both of us now. The line went dead. Jody dropped the phone. Whisper stood and moved toward her, pressing that massive head against her leg. The rumble continued. Steady, trusting. She had 48 hours to decide if she could live with herself after surrendering Whisper to her fate. Or if she was willing to run. Smash that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, would you fight the system to save something you love, even if it meant losing everything? Because what Jody does next will change both their lives forever. Jody had 36 hours left when Dutch Kearney knocked on her door. The retired ranger stood on her porch with his arms crossed, face grim. We need to talk, he said. She kept the door mostly closed, blocking his view inside. About what? Tom Bridger found 3 of his cattle gone yesterday morning, taken down cleanly. Something dragged one of them 100 yards into the trees. Dutch's eyes narrowed. You seen anything unusual up here? Just the usual wildlife. Mountain lion tracks all over his property, except they're bigger than any mountain lion I've seen in 40 years. He leaned closer. And they're heading this direction. Behind Jody, something moved. Dutch's gaze shifted past her shoulder. She stepped sideways, blocking his view again. I haven't seen anything, she said firmly. Dutch studied her face. People are talking, Jody, saying strange things about your place, about sounds at night, about something black moving through the trees. He paused. If you're keeping something you shouldn't be, now's the time to come clean." "There's nothing here." He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But he nodded slowly and stepped back. "State Fish and Wildlife is getting involved. They're asking questions. If I were you, I'd make sure everything here is by the book." He left without another word. Jody closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Whisper emerged from the bedroom, moving with that unnatural silence. She'd gotten bigger again, easily 80 pounds now. The shoulders were massive, the paws the size of Jody's fist. "We're running out of time," Jody whispered. The rumors spread faster than the snow melted. By the next morning, Jody's phone was flooded with missed calls. Messages from numbers she didn't recognize. 3 voicemails from the county sheriff, 1 from Idaho Fish and Game. She didn't return any of them. The real problem started when someone posted photos online. Jody saw them on a local Facebook group at 2 in the morning. Grainy shots taken through a telephoto lens. Whisper standing at the cabin window. Whisper outside near the woodpile. The images were dark and unclear, but clear enough. The comment section exploded within hours. "That's not a house cat. Robson woman is hiding something dangerous. Someone needs to check that cabin before more livestock is lost. Call Fish and Wildlife now." The post was shared 47 times before dawn. By sunrise, a local news blog had picked it up. By noon, the story was on 3 regional websites. Mystery predator in northern Idaho, resident possibly harboring illegal wildlife. Jody's name appeared in 2 articles. Her phone rang constantly. She stopped answering, stopped checking messages. Whisper sensed the tension and stayed close. That low rumble constant, like she was trying to comfort Jody through something she couldn't possibly understand. Or maybe she understood perfectly. On the morning Jody had 12 hours left before Mason's deadline, a truck pulled up the driveway. State official markings on the door. 2 men got out. One wore a Fish and Wildlife uniform. The other was plain clothes, probably law enforcement. Jody watched through the window as they approached. Whisper stood beside her, ears flat, body tense. The knock was sharp, official. "Miss Robson, this is Officer Hendricks with Idaho Fish and Game. We need to speak with you about reports of undocumented wildlife on your property." Jody didn't move. "We have reasonable cause to believe you're harboring a large predator without proper permits. You need to open this door." Whisper's rumble turned into something darker, a growl that vibrated through the floor. "Miss Robson, if you don't cooperate, we'll be forced to escalate this matter." Jody's hands shook. She could open the door, admit everything, let them take Whisper and watch her fade away within 3 days. Or she could stay silent and make everything worse. The second man pulled out his phone, spoke quietly into it. Jody's stomach dropped. 5 minutes later, 2 more trucks arrived, then a sheriff's vehicle. Within 20 minutes, 6 people stood on her property. Radios crackling, voices discussing strategy. Someone set up a perimeter. Jody's phone buzzed, a text from Mason. "I just got a call from the state. They're coming for her. Warrant's been fast-tracked. You have maybe an hour. I'm sorry." She looked at Whisper. Those golden eyes stared back with complete trust. The creature who'd saved her life, who'd pulled her from depression, who'd given her a reason to keep going when everything else fell apart. An hour. Jody moved to the bedroom and pulled out her hiking pack, started throwing in supplies, food, water, first aid kit, knife, matches. Her hands moved on autopilot while her mind screamed that this was insane. She was about to run from law enforcement to protect an animal that had hunted livestock and could turn on her just as easily. But when she looked at Whisper sitting calmly in the doorway, watching her pack, she knew she'd already made the choice. She wasn't letting them take her. A loud knock shook the front door. "Miss Robson, we have a warrant to search these premises for illegal wildlife. You have 5 minutes to open this door voluntarily, or we're coming in." Jody zipped the pack closed, looked at Whisper. "We're leaving," she whispered. "Right now." She moved to the back window, pushed it open. The forest stretched out behind the cabin, dense and dark. If they ran now, they might have a chance. Might disappear into the wilderness before anyone realized they were gone. Whisper jumped through the window first. Silent. Efficient. Jody threw her pack out and climbed after. Behind them, something heavy hit the front door. Splintering wood, shouting voices. Jody ran. Drop a like right now and comment whether you think she's making the right choice, because what happens next will put both of them in more danger than either could survive alone. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. The forest swallowed them whole. Jody ran until her lungs burned, branches whipping her face, snow soaking through her boots. Whisper moved beside her like a shadow, silent and impossibly fast. Behind them, voices shouted orders. Radios crackled. Doors slammed. They had minutes at best. Jody pushed deeper into the pines, away from the trails, away from anything familiar. Her pack slammed against her back with each step. Whisper stayed close, adjusting her pace to match Jody's, golden eyes scanning the forest ahead. The sound of engines cut through the trees. ATVs. They were mobilizing faster than she'd expected. "We need to go higher," Jody gasped. They climbed toward the ridge, the same place where Whisper had fought the wolf. The terrain grew steeper. Jody's legs screamed. She grabbed exposed roots and pulled herself up rocky sections, pack threatening to drag her backward. Whisper scaled the same obstacles effortlessly, waiting at the top of each rise, watching Jody struggle. When they reached the ridge, Jody collapsed against a boulder. Her chest heaved. Sweat froze on her face despite the cold. Below, through gaps in the trees, she could see trucks spreading out along the logging roads. Men with rifles, radios, dogs. They had brought tracking dogs. Jody's stomach dropped. Dogs would pick up Whisper's scent in minutes. The trail they'd left was obvious. Broken branches, disturbed snow, fresh tracks. She had been stupid to run, stupid to think they could disappear. The sound came before she saw it. A helicopter. Low and loud, moving up the valley. Jody pressed against the boulder, pulling Whisper close. The black fur would stand out against the snow. If they spotted her from above, it was over. The helicopter passed overhead, rotors deafening. It circled once, twice, then moved north. Not gone. Just searching a different section. Jody forced herself to stand. "We keep moving." They pushed into deeper forest where the canopy was thicker. Harder for aerial surveillance, harder for everything. The cold intensified as evening approached. Jody's fingers were numb. Her face felt frozen. Whisper showed no signs of discomfort, moving through the snow like she was built for it. Maybe she was. 2 hours later, Jody heard the dogs. Distant but getting closer. Barking and baying echoed through the valley. They'd found the trail. She looked at Whisper, whose ears had flattened at the sound. "I'm so sorry," Jody whispered. Whisper pressed against her leg. That familiar rumble. Steady. Trusting. Jody made a decision she knew would haunt her forever. She knelt in the snow and grabbed Whisper's face with both hands, forcing those golden eyes to meet hers. "You need to go. They're not looking for me. They're looking for you." Her voice cracked. "Run. Go deeper into the mountains. I'll lead them away." Whisper didn't move. "Please." Tears froze on Jody's cheeks. "I can't watch them take you. Go." She pushed Whisper away, hard. Whisper stumbled back, confusion in those eyes. Jody stood and started walking in the opposite direction, making noise, breaking branches, leaving an obvious trail. Whisper followed. "No!" Jody spun around. "You have to leave!" Whisper sat, stared at her, refused to move unless Jody moved. The truth hit like a physical blow. Whisper wasn't going to run, wasn't going to abandon her. Whatever bond they'd formed in that cabin, whatever connection existed between them, it was absolute. Whisper would rather face the end beside Jody than survive alone in the wild. "No, no, no," Jody sobbed. The dogs were closer now, maybe half a mile. She could hear men shouting directions. The helicopter returned, circling their position. Spotlights cut through the darkening forest. They were trapped. Jody sank to her knees. This was it. The end of the run. She'd failed. They'd take Whisper. Terminate her. And Jody would have to live with the knowledge that she'd saved this creature from a blizzard, only to lead her into a trap. Whisper moved in front of her, positioned herself between Jody and the approaching sounds. Protective, defensive, ready to fight. "Don't," Jody whispered. "They have weapons, tranquilizers. You can't win this." Whisper's body tensed. The rumble stopped. Her ears swiveled toward something in the forest. Something the dogs hadn't reached yet. Something Jody couldn't hear. Then it came. A sound that made every hair on Jody's body stand up. Deep, resonant. A bellow that echoed through the valley like thunder. Not a wolf, not a bear. Nothing Jody had ever heard before. It came from the north, somewhere in the deep forest where no trails existed. The dogs stopped barking. Complete silence except for that sound reverberating through the trees. Whisper's entire body went rigid. Not defensive. Not afraid. Responding. She opened her mouth and released an answering call. Higher pitched than the first, but unmistakable in its meaning. The two sounds connected across the distance. Communication, recognition. Jody's blood went cold. Mason's words crashed through her mind. "If she really is what I think, there might be others out there. A breeding population." The bellow came again, closer this time, moving fast through the forest, something massive, something that made the 100-pound jaguar beside Jody look small by comparison. Below them, men shouted. The dogs whined, engines revved. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew something was coming that wasn't supposed to exist. Whisper looked at Jody one last time. Those golden eyes held an apology. Or maybe a goodbye. Then she turned and vanished into the darkening forest, racing toward the sound. Toward whatever was out there. Toward something Jody couldn't protect her from, and couldn't follow. The forest went silent. And Jody was left alone in the snow, knowing that whatever happened next would be beyond anything the authorities had prepared for. Jody stood frozen in the snow, staring at the place where Whisper had disappeared. The forest held its breath. No wind, no movement, just suffocating silence broken only by the distant rumble of helicopter blades and the nervous voices of men below who'd heard something they couldn't explain. Then the world exploded into chaos. A crashing sound erupted from the north, trees snapping, branches breaking, something huge moving fast and completely out of control, The helicopter's spotlight swung toward the noise, illuminating a section of forest 50 yards downslope from Jody's position. A massive bull elk burst through the tree line, not running, stampeding, eyes wild with terror, panic visible in every movement, antlers spanning 6 feet across, still velvet-covered, dangerous. It wasn't fleeing from predators. It was fleeing from something far worse, something that had driven it into absolute panic. And it was heading straight toward the line of rangers and officers spread across the valley floor. "Elk! Elk incoming!" someone shouted. Men scattered. Dogs yelped and pulled at leashes. The bull weighed at least 800 pounds and showed no signs of slowing. One ranger stumbled backward, tripped over equipment, went down hard. The elk's trajectory would take it right over him. The ranger threw his arms up. Useless protection against that much weight and momentum, Whisper appeared from nowhere. She hit the elk from the side like a missile, full body collision, claws extended. The impact didn't stop the bull's momentum, but changed its direction. The massive animal veered left, missing the fallen ranger by inches. Antlers gouged the snow where his head had been seconds before. Whisper held on. Her grip held firm on the elk's shoulder, using her weight to drag it down. The bull bellowed and spun, trying to shake her off. They crashed through the clearing in a tangle of black fur and brown hide, snow exploding around them. Men shouted. Rifles came up. Someone yelled, "Don't shoot! You'll hit Patterson!" The fallen ranger scrambled backward, eyes wide with shock. Whisper released her grip and dropped to the snow. The elk kept running, dark marks visible on its shoulder, terror driving it away from the commotion and deeper into the forest. Within seconds, it vanished into the darkness, crashing through underbrush. Whisper stood in the center of the clearing, breathing hard, evidence of the impact on her muzzle. Surrounded by armed men and spotlights and weapons, all pointed directly at her. Nobody moved. The ranger on the ground stared at Whisper. She'd saved his life. Diverted an 800-pound animal that would have ended it all instantly. Protected him instead of running. Protected him, despite the fact that he had been hunting her. Jody started down the slope without thinking. Branches tore at her jacket. She half ran, half slid through the snow until she reached the clearing's edge. "Don't fire!" she screamed. "Please don't hurt her!" Every head turned. Spotlights swung toward her. She raised her hands, walking slowly into the open. "Ma'am, stay back," someone ordered. "She just saved your man." Jody's voice shook. "That elk would have crushed him." The head ranger, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward. She'd seen everything. Watched Whisper intercept the elk. Watched her change its trajectory with perfect precision. Not attacking, defending. "Lower your weapons," the ranger said quietly. "But Chief," "I said lower them." Her voice carried authority that wasn't questioned. Rifles dropped slightly. Tension remained, but the immediate threat eased. Whisper hadn't moved, still standing in the center of the clearing, golden eyes shifting between Jody and the rangers. Calculating. Waiting. The chief ranger approached slowly. Stopped 10 feet from Whisper. Studied her in the harsh spotlight. The size, the build, the intelligence in those eyes. "That's not a mountain lion," she said. "No, ma'am," another ranger replied. "I've never seen anything like it." The dogs had gone quiet. Some cowered behind their handlers. Others watched Whisper with what looked like respect, recognition of a superior predator. The ranger Patterson, who'd nearly been trampled, got to his feet, brushing snow from his uniform. He stared at Whisper. I'd be gone. Would you trust something that just saved your life, even if you'd been hunting it? Comment your answer below. Chief Martinez pulled out her radio. The entire valley went silent, waiting for her next words. Jody held her breath. This woman's decision would determine if Whisper lived or was lost. Martinez pressed the radio button. This is Chief Martinez to all units. Stand down. Repeat, stand down. Static crackled. Chief, we have authorization to tranquilize. I don't care what authorization you have. Martinez's eyes never left Whisper. What I just witnessed changes the situation. That animal had multiple opportunities to attack, had men on the ground defenseless. Instead, she diverted a threat away from my officer. She paused. We may have this all wrong. Chief, Fish and Wildlife wants... Fish and Wildlife can wait until I have all the facts. Martinez lowered the radio and looked at Jody. You're Robson? Yes? That creature yours? I saved her from a blizzard 5 weeks ago. She was dying. Martinez processed that. Looked back at Whisper. She's grown considerably in 5 weeks. Yes. And you've been keeping her without permits, documentation, or reporting to proper authorities. Jody swallowed hard. Yes. The chief ranger was silent for a long moment. The helicopter hovered overhead. Men waited for orders. Dogs whined nervously. Whisper stood perfectly still, as if she understood her fate was being decided. Then that sound came again. The deep bellow from the forest, closer now, much closer. Every person in that clearing tensed. Rifles came back up. Spotlights swept the tree line. Something moved in the shadows beyond the lights. Something massive. Black fur, golden eyes. But these eyes were higher off the ground. The shoulders broader. The presence overwhelming. An adult. Martinez's voice was barely a whisper. What on earth is that? Whisper's ears swiveled toward the sound. Her body language changed. Not defensive, submissive. She took 3 steps toward the forest and stopped, looking back at Jody one last time. The adult bellowed again, a command. And Whisper, despite everything, despite the bond, despite 5 weeks of trust and protection, turned and ran toward the sound. Toward whatever was calling her home. Toward a family Jody never knew existed. Jody's heart shattered. Martinez grabbed her radio. All units, do not pursue. Repeat, do not pursue. We need to reassess this entire situation before anyone makes another move. 3 weeks later, Jody sat in a sterile conference room at the Idaho Department of Fish and Game headquarters. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A panel of 7 officials faced her across a long table. Wildlife biologists, state representatives, a federal conservation officer. Dr. Mason Graves sat at the end, avoiding her eyes. Behind them, through a large observation window, Whisper paced inside a reinforced enclosure. She'd grown again, nearly 120 pounds now. The temporary holding facility wasn't built for something this powerful. Already she'd bent 2 bars and torn through a reinforced door. They'd had to sedate her twice just to move her between spaces. Jody watched Whisper through the glass, her heart breaking with each pacing step. Miss Robson. The commission chair, a stern woman named Patricia Holbrook, adjusted her reading glasses. We've reviewed Dr. Graves's DNA analysis. We've examined the incident reports from the valley. We've consulted with federal wildlife authorities. She paused. What you've been harboring is a melanistic North American jaguar, a subspecies believed extinct for 75 years. I know what she is. Jody said quietly. Then you understand the gravity of this situation. An untracked apex predator, no vaccination records, no behavioral assessment, and evidence of multiple livestock losses. She was protecting territory. That's natural behavior. Natural for the wild, not for proximity to human settlements. Holbrook shuffled papers. The question before this commission is simple. What do we do with her? Mason finally spoke. She can't survive in captivity. I've worked with big cats for 30 years. Jaguars require massive territories, complex enrichment, specialized care. No facility in North America is equipped for a melanistic jaguar. Most don't even have genetic stock to understand her needs. So we release her? Another official asked. Into what? Mason gestured to maps on the table. There's no documented population, no established territory, no prey corridors. She'll either starve or come into conflict with humans again. There are others, Jody interrupted. That night in the forest. We all heard it. The adult that called her. The room went silent. Everyone had heard the recording from the Ranger's body cameras. That deep, impossible bellow that shouldn't exist in Idaho. Unconfirmed, Holbrook said carefully. We have audio, no visual confirmation, no tracks. No proof of a breeding population. She responded to it, Jody pressed. She knew what it was, where it was. These jaguars survived 75 years without human knowledge. They have territory, they have structure. Whisper belongs with them, not in a cage. And if she hunts again? Then you track her, monitor her, but give her a chance to be what she is. Holbrook leaned back. The federal position is clear. Untracked large predators pose ecological risks. Protocol requires either captive transfer or permanent termination. Jody's hands clenched into fists. You mean end her? We mean make the responsible decision for public safety and ecological balance. She saved a man's life. Jody's voice rose. Your ranger, Patterson. He testified to that. She could have run, could have attacked. She chose to protect. One incident doesn't override months of concerning behavior, Holbrook countered. The bond you formed with this animal is admirable, Miss Robson, but it's also problematic. She's imprinted on you. Her natural behaviors have been compromised. Even if we wanted to release her, we can't guarantee she wouldn't seek out human contact again. The words hit like a physical blow. Jody had done this. Her choice to save Whisper, her choice to hide her, her choice to run. Every decision had led to this moment where Whisper's life hung in the balance because Jody had interfered with something that should have stayed wild. Would you have done things differently? Tell me in the comments because this isn't over yet. This commission will deliberate and issue a decision within 72 hours, Holbrook announced. Miss Robson, you're dismissed. Jody didn't move. She turned to the observation window. Whisper had stopped pacing. She stood at the glass, golden eyes locked on Jody. No sound, no movement. Just watching with an intelligence that broke Jody's heart. Slowly, Jody stood and walked to the window. Placed her palm flat against the glass. Whisper approached. Lifted one massive paw. Pressed it against the glass exactly where Jody's hand rested. The gesture was so deliberate, so human, that several officials shifted uncomfortably. Through the glass, separated by 3 inches of reinforced material, they connected one last time. Jody's tears fell silently. Whisper's eyes never wavered. I'm fighting for you, Jody whispered. I won't stop, I promise. Whisper's paw remained pressed against the glass. Waiting. Trusting. An official cleared his throat. "Miss Robson, we need you to leave now." Jody pulled her hand away. Whisper's paw stayed on the glass for 3 more seconds before dropping. She watched Jody walk toward the door, head tilting slightly, as if asking a question that had no answer. The door closed between them. Jody stood in the hallway, shaking. Mason emerged a moment later, looking exhausted. "What are they going to decide?" she asked. He hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. This is unprecedented. No protocols exist for extinct species reappearing. No guidelines for handling animals with your level of bonding." He paused. "But the federal pressure is significant. They want closure. Clean resolution. They want her gone." Mason didn't deny it. Jody looked back at the closed door. Beyond it, Whisper waited in a cage. Waiting for humans to decide if something wild and beautiful deserved to exist. Waiting for the world to choose between fear and hope. And Jody realized the terrible truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. Monsters aren't always born. Sometimes they're created by the choices we make. If this story moved you, subscribe now. We need your support to keep telling stories that challenge what we think we know about the wild, about connection, about the impossible choices that define us. Hit that like button, share this everywhere. Drop a comment and tell me, was Jody wrong to save Whisper, or was the system wrong for forcing this choice? Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Don't let this be the last one. We're just getting started, but only if you're with us. Subscribe. Now. Because the next story we tell could be the one that changes everything you believe.